President, please be seated. The court is back in session. Before I give the floor to the co-prosecutors, that the witness sometimes feel difficulty to respond to long questions put by the co-prosecutor. And when the witness speaks, it is very difficult as well for us to understand in Khmer. And I think perhaps the witness has difficulty in understanding Khmer language as well. So I suggest and instruct the co-prosecutor to put a simple and short question so that the witness can respond to the questions. Otherwise, it will pose trouble in ascertaining the truth in our case. Now the floor is given to the co-prosecutor to resume his line of questioning. You may now proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, Mr. Witness. I want to ask you a few more questions about your background. Could you tell us about your family in Ampul village back in 1973? Were you married, and did you have children then?
Witness, I was married in 1973 and I had 2 children at that time in Ampul village.
And was there a mosque in Ampul village?
Answer, yes. There was a big mosque and the mosque remains until now.
Can you tell us a little bit about the Cham leaders in your village or district? For example, did you have a Hakim in your village, and who was he?
Answer, Let was the village, Let and Loss were the village chiefs during that time, the Lonal period.
Were they Hakim, or were they regular village leaders? There were Hakims at Papi. However, I did not know Hakims very clearly at that time. Do you know what happened to the Hakims after the Khmer Rouge arrived?
Answer, I have no idea, and I also did not know at that time what did Hakims do or what their position were.
I want to now turn to the period when the Khmer Rouge arrived and took control in your area, and to ask you about how things changed in your village when the Khmer Rouge took control there.
After Khmer Rouge came to control, all kitchenwares had been collected. Halls were built for all of us. We had to eat collectively, communally, and the village, the area was under strict control of Khmer Rouge at that time.
When the Khmer Rouge first arrived, were you still allowed to practice Islam and to speak the Cham language? And if so, how long were you allowed to practice Islam and speak your language?
Answer: no, no more prayers and no more religion, and the situation was strict at that time. Who insisted practicing Islam, make a religion, they would be arrested, and we were not allowed. We could not even sit in group and discuss when I was young.
Do you remember who or how it was announced to the people in your village that you were no longer allowed to practice Islam?
Answer: all I know is that Comrade Singh was the chief, and he was responsible for Krochma district. Comrade Singh, he was strict. He ordered us to have a short haircut, and we were not allowed to practice Islam. And headdress were not allowed to be used also at that time.
When the Khmer Rouge banned you from practicing your religion, what was done with all the Qurans in your village?
Answer: Qurans had been gathered, collected, and burnt, and they were collected from houses and burned down. And Kokpol made mention that time there was a rebellion within villages to fight against the prohibition and to such acts.
I'll be asking you some questions about that rebellion in a little while. Who was it that went around and gathered and burned the Qurans in your village?
Village chiefs, security guards within villages went around and collect the Qurans. They received order from upper echelon.
And the mosque in your village, what was it used for when you were no longer allowed to practice your religion?
Answer: Muslim women and old Muslim ladies were called to stay in the mosque, and they were assigned to do agricultural farming.
Can you explain a little to the court about the importance of prayer in the Islam religion and what it was like for the Cham people when you were no longer allowed to go to prayer?
Answer: no one dare to do so. If one did dares to resist the order, they would be arrested and sent away. We were prohibited from talking, and if we dare to speak freely, we would be arrested.
And when you were no longer allowed to practice your religion, were you also not allowed to speak the Cham language anymore?
Answer: no, we were not allowed to speak a Cham language. Absolutely, only Khmer language was allowed to speak at that time. We could speak Cham, but in a secret way, not loudly. If they happened to hear we speaking Cham language, we would be taken away and killed.
Were there many Cham people in your area who did not know how to speak Khmer well and who had difficulty when they could no longer speak the Cham language?
Answer: Cham language was banned, but we could speak very little Khmer at that time. And after 3 years, we were allowed to speak our language. And during that period, even porks were not allowed to eat. Even the porks were given to all of us to eat, rather.
You mentioned that one of the things that happened with the Khmer Rouge was that people had to have their hair short. Can you explain, was it against the Cham religion or culture for women to have short hair?
Answer: for Muslim people, based on the holy book of Quran, Muslim women has to have long hair. However, during that time, the Muslim women were instructed to have a short haircut. So that is the difference between the religion. During that time, we adhered to their instructions. It was okay because after a while our hair grew long.
How did the Khmer Rouge go about making people cut their hair? Did they send in cadres to do that?
Answer: no cadres are coming to cut our hairs. The order went through village chiefs and we were instructed to have short hairs. Otherwise, we were considered opposing Angkar.
And when the Khmer Rouge took control, were you allowed to still wear traditional Cham clothes?
No. Rather, actually, we were allowed to wear our traditional clothing. However, for prayers, practicing religion was prohibited. For traditional clothing, it does not cause any trouble to all of us. We were allowed to wear our traditional clothing at that time.
Was there any point in time where you couldn't wear your traditional clothes and you had to wear all black clothes?
Answer. We had the same black clothes to wear after we were given with such clothes.
You made mention a little while ago to a rebellion that took place in Kopal. What can you tell us about what took place at Kopal?
Answer. We people within Ampel village were not allowed to cross over to Kapal. There were guns or rifles at on the Kapal at that time, and we were not allowed to went into Kapal because they were afraid that we from our village would go to help Cham people in on Kapal.
How far was your village from Kopal?
Answer. It was about 2 kilometers away from my village to Kapal. There were artilleries used by them, and we were appraised to go to Kapal to help the people there. We had to stay calmly in our village.
Do you remember when it was that these events took place in Kopal?
Answer. Shortly before 1975, let me rephrase. There was evacuation in 1975, and after rebellion at Kapal, all Muslim people were evacuated. There was a fighting on Kapal, and in 1974 and 1975, Cham people were evacuated.
Am I correct that Kopal was an island in the Mekong River?
Answer: Yes, it was on the island in the middle of the river.
And when the fighting was going on there, were you able to hear or see what was going on?
Answer: I was living in Umpel village. My elder sibling was living in on the island. He or she was my elder brother or sister-in-law. He came to my village and tell me my in-law at the time was living on the island. He fled to Umpel village, and I knew about this from him or her.
What did your in-law tell you about what was happening in Kapal?
Answer: those who opposed Angkar were smashed or shot dead, and some of them had their throats cut. Most Muslim men were killed, only Muslim women remained.
Do you remember whether the events at Kapal took place during Ramadan that year?
Answer: I could not get your question, Mr. Co-Prosecutor. Could you repeat it? What did you say a while ago?
My question was whether the events that took place at Kopal, the rebellion, the fighting, did that occur during the Ramadan month?
Answer: no, it did not happen in Ramadan. I could not tell you the exact month when the rebellion took place. But from my recollection, it did not happen during the Ramadan, because we were not allowed to practice our religion. That is why there was a rebellion at that time, and they brought in the troops to curb the rebellion.
Do I understand correctly then that at that time you were not allowed to respect Ramadan? Do I understand correctly?
Answer: yes, your understanding is correct. Because of this, there was a rebellion happening at that time.
Now, you've mentioned that after this rebellion, the Cham people were evacuated. Can you tell us what happened to your family after the Kopal rebellion?
My families, together with the villages, were evacuated at that time. Some were sent to Battambang province, some to Stang Trong, and some other were transferred to Kroches. For my villagers and my families, we were sent to Karachi. No one were allowed to live in our own villages at that time.
Can you clarify, were all the Cham people from Ampul village required to leave, or was it just some of the Cham people from your village who were moved?
อ๋อខ្លះ
Answer. Some could stay in my village. Half of the villagers were transferred to different places.
Who was it that told you that you and your family had to leave your home village?
Answer. This district committee and people at a commune level, including the security guards, ordered all of us to leave our village, and we were instructed to board a motorboat or ship to Battambang at that time.
Where was it that you were sent to board this boat?
Answer. Some others were instructed to board trucks to Battambang, to Krajek, and to other places. And for my families and some other villagers, we were instructed to leave for Sangkai for 20 days, and after that time we were transferred back to Karachi.
Could you tell us where Sangkai was? What district or commune was that?
Answer. Sangkai was located close to Bangkit in Stang Trong. It was close to Krichestria village, Krochma district. So it was located on the different side from Krochma.
Do I understand correctly then that you were first taken by boat across the river to Stung Trong district? Is that right?
Yes, we were taken first to Stung Trong district. All of us were sent there.
How many families were sent with you by boat to Stung Trong?
There were many people, but I cannot recall the exact number. There were around 100 boats loaded with people to Stung Trong district. And when we arrived, trucks came to take us to various districts, to Songkai and through other areas. And there were not enough trucks for those people living the boats.
ผมมันมาพบ
Because we were gathered from various other villages and not only the Ampel village. So there were many Acham people and we were sent together.
Do you know whether all the people who were being moved with you were Cham, or whether there were also Khmer people who were being moved out of Kot Chamar district?
No, there were no Khmer people. All were the Cham people who were moved.
จัดมองเขา
They were all Cham people. That is when we were moved from Kampong Cham.
Did anyone explain to you why you were being moved out of Kot Chamar district?
We were told the villages were crowded, so that we were being sent to Battambang, since there were plenty of lands for us to live in Battambang, so it would not be as crowded as the villages that we were living in.
And you said that when you were taken to Stung Trong, you spent 20 days in Sankei. What happened to you after that? Where were you sent? Where were you moved after those 20 days?
Then we were sent to Prek Achi area, that was situated along the Trier village and near Kapong Traj.
Was Prehachi in Krok Chamar district?
Yes, it was located in Krochma district. And the Trier village was also located in that district. So we were sent to that village and we were placed into various houses belonging to the Khmer people. And we were totally mingled with the local based people who were Khmer there.
Did anyone ever explain to you why you were moved for 20 days over to the other side of the river in Stung Trong and then moved back to Krochamar?
They said that because too many people had moved to Battambang and there was no place for us, so we were moved again.
How long did you live in Prehachi village?
No.
We were there for about 3 years. Then we returned to Ampel village. So from my recollection, we left our village for about 3 years. And then when the attack occurred in the east zone, we were instructed to return to our respective villages.
I'll get to that period where you were told to go back to your home village in a little bit. First, can you tell us a little bit about how the Cham people who were moved to Prehechi village, how are you treated by the local cadres when you lived there?
They didn't do anything to us. The village chief did not do anything to us, and if we wanted to remain there, we could, or if we wanted to move on, we could move on. He didn't chase us away from his village. I refer to the village chief.
What were you assigned to do during the years that you lived in Preachi?
nhóm
I was actually doing the water wheel into the rice field. And I worked actually behind the Prechi village, that is to water wheel the rice fields there.
During the time that you lived in Preachi, were you allowed to practice the Cham religion or to speak the Cham language?
No, we were not allowed to engage in any worship service. And as I said it earlier, we were desecrated into various homes of the Khmer people. We were not allowed to engage in any worship at all, and we ate communally.
Did you have to eat pork during those years?
It was mixed. When we didn't want to eat, then they actually mixed the pork meat in the beef meat, and we didn't know about that. And every time there was forced to eat pork meat. And some of us could not take it, so they vomited after they ate it.
Did there come a time when you were in Preachi where the local Khmer Rouge cadres from the East Zone were arrested and replaced by cadres from a different region?
chăm
We were arrested when we were returned to Ampel village. We were told that the ones came from Prachi village would be relocated to Trier, and that was the time that some of us had been arrested and killed.
I think you were talking about yourself and the Cham people before I asked you about what happened to you and the other Cham. I was asking about the Khmer Rouge cadres from the East Zone. Do you remember whether there was a time where they were replaced by Khmer Rouge cadres from the southwest zone?
No. There was no replacement. Actually, the Southwest was all in control at the time. That is, after their arrival, the full authority was with them, and that happened in every village.
ពេលហ្នឹង
And before that, they actually were fighting with the forces from the East Zone, and after the battle, they took control of every village.
What year, when was it that the Southwest cadres took control of your area?
So the evacuation took place in 1975, and that happened about 3 years after. Then I could say it happened around mid 1978. That was the times that the extensive killings took place.
You've mentioned already that you were instructed to go back to your home village. How long was it after the arrival of the Southwest cadres that you were told to leave Prehachi and go back to Ampel village?
It was not long after we arrived at Ampel village. It was only about a fortnight. And actually, we had stayed at Prechi village for about 3 years. Then we were relocated back to Ampel village, and about a fortnight later, we were sent further to Trier village.
Who was it that told you to go back to your home village? And who was it that told you when you got back to Ampel to go to Tria village?
The village chief told us to return to Ampel village. He was a Southwest cadre, and they told us that now the peace prevailed, and that we could return to our native village. And when we were at Ampel village, saying the village chief there told us that Ampel now was crowded with people. For that reason, we were requested to relocate in Trier village after a fortnight remaining in Ampel.
I want to read to you a short excerpt from one of your, the interview that you gave to Isa Osman that was published in the Cham Rebellion. This is document E3/9334, E3/9334, Khmer ERN 002044434, English 002044442, and French 0027473. This is what you said in that interview, quote, "In 1978, the cadres of the Central Zone. And I note that in your OCIJ interview, you corrected this to Southwest Zone. So starting again with your correction. In 1978, the cadres of the Southwest Zone came in and set up a new administration structure. The people welcomed this because the cadres claimed they were uncorrupted and had come to liberate us from the clutches of the Khmer Rouge traitors. They announced that those people who had come from far away should now go back home to their places of birth. This announcement gave us hope again for the Cham race. End of quote. Who was it that told you, who was it that referred to the old cadres as traitors? Do you remember?
Not jam.
No, I don't. I only heard through group chief and the village chief about that. We heard that the Southwest group came to screen the people and that we would not be in any difficult situation after their arrival. That's what we were told. They said that they came because of the difficult condition experienced by us, and that peace should prevail shortly after, and that we would be allowed to return to our home villages.
And in the interview excerpt of yours that I just read, you told Isa Osman that the announcement to return to your home village gave you hope again for the Cham race. Can you explain why you had lost hope for the Cham race at that time?
It was their policy to seriously mistreat us. We were absolutely prohibited from engaging in any prayer or worship. And if we were to make even a smallest mistake, we would be arrested and killed.
Na
Even the village chief or the commune chiefs in succession were arrested and killed after the arrival of the Southwest group. They kept disappearing one after another.
Now, you've testified that you returned to your home village, to Umpul village, for a short period. Can you tell us what you observed in 1978 when you went back to your home village? And specifically, how many Cham families were left in Umpul village when you returned?
There were quite a number of Cham families remained in the village, although I cannot tell you the total numbers. And some Khmer families were living mingled with the Cham people there in Umpul village. So they were living, mixing with the Khmer people.
Let me read to you another excerpt from the interview you gave to Isa Osman. This is again E3/9334. This excerpt is at Khmer 00204-435. English 002044442, and French 002747723. And you're describing here how you returned to Ampol village, and this is what you said, quote, "I observed that there were only 10 Cham families left in the village out of the hundreds that used to live there. My older sister Afia was among those who were still there. I stayed with her." End of quote. Does this refresh your recollection about how many Cham families were left when you returned to Ampol village? Is it correct that there were only 10 Cham families there?
No, there were more than 10 families still living in that village.
ដល់ប្រមាណ20
But I cannot tell you how many families. It could be between 20, 30 or 40 families still living there.
You've testified that you were allowed to stay in Ampol village for about a fortnight, and that you were then told to go to Tria village. Can you describe for us what happened during your trip from Ampol to Tria village?
We were told to return to go to Trier village, so in the morning we packed our little belonging, and everything had to be placed on an outskirt. We believed that we were sent to Trier village, and when we arrived in Trier village, we didn't even have any rice to eat yet, and we saw the Trier village was full of soldiers.
How many people or how many families, how many Cham families were sent with you from Ampol village to Tria?
There were 20 ox carts, and actually the 20 ox carts were full of members from 30 Cham families.
And when you were traveling on the road from Ampol to Tria village, did you see other Cham people walking or moving in that same direction?
No, I did not. There was only a group of us living in Ampol village, and I saw people, lots of people in Krochma village, and we were all destined to be killed. And when we arrived in Trier village, the soldiers there ordered us to offload our belongings and place them in a mosque there.
I need to have you clarify something for me. When you arrived in Tria village, was it just the 30 families that had been sent from Ampul village, or were there other Cham people who had also been sent to Tria from other villages?
There were other Cham families from Soy village. So Soy and Ampel villages were the two villages where the Cham people were sent to Trier village. In fact, more people had actually been sent to Trier village before our turn, and upon our arrival, we saw some houses were full of people who had arrived before us.
Where was Soy village, and can you tell us approximately how many Cham families were sent from Soy village to Tria?
Half of the Cham people was from from Soy village, while the rest came from Ampel village. So I could say about 15 to 20 families amongst us were from Soy village.
Do you remember on your way from Ampul to Tria village meeting an elderly Cham woman in a village called Kasach Praches? Do you remember meeting an elderly Cham woman, and do you remember what she told you?
When we were almost near Trier village, Cham people there were asking us where we were heading to, and we told them that we were told to leave Ampel village to go to Trier village. And we were told that some Cham people were blindfolded and sent to the river bank, and some Cham women cried, and in fact we were told that the blindfolding took place almost every day, and those people who were being blindfolded were sent to the river bank. And we heard about this information when we were approaching Trier village, and we were told by the Cham people there.
How far was it from Ampul to Tria village, and how long did it take you to walk there that day?
At that time, we traveled on an ox cart, so it was rather slow. We started the journey in the morning, and when we arrived in Trier village, it was in late afternoon. And as I told you, Comrade saying in Ampel village did not allow us to remain anymore in Ampel village, and we were sent to Trier village.
You've mentioned Comrade Singh a number of times. What was Comrade Singh doing while you were traveling from Ampul to Tria?
Answer: he had overall responsibility over Kruchma district. He was among the Kruchma district committee.
When you were sent from Ampol to Tria village, did your entire family go with you? That is, your wife and your 2 children?
Answer. We went together. I was traveling with my wife and my toddler, and also my mother-in-law was with me at that time.
How old was your toddler then?
con dụ
My toddler could speak at the time. Perhaps he or she was 2 or 3 years old at that time.
You've said that you went with your wife and your 2 to 3-year-old toddler and your mother-in-law. Where were the other members of your family? Did you have other children at the time, and where were they?
khi miền
Answer. We went together with other family members. Some members within other families some women within other families were pregnant, and other families also had small children. Upon our arrival at the designated places, we were separated from each other. The adult or the girls who were full-fledged were not allowed to stay together with their parents at that time.
Where was it that the girls, the Cham girls, were separated from your group?
bảy nơi bất đồng
These unmarried girls were put in a different group, and as for men and women, they were put in different groups. And at that time, the men were allowed to go to have porridge, and women were told to stay at one particular place. It was during the time when the sun was already down at that time.
You said that the men were told to go to a house to have porridge. How many men were sent to this house where you were told you were going to have porridge?
Answer. Approximately 40 of them climbed up onto a house.
Were you still with your wife and toddler at this time, or had you been separated?
có bảy từ rồi
I was separated from my wife to go to have the porridge. My wife was staying in the mosque at that time. we as men were allowed to go to the river front, and we were told to stand in line at that time, and they pointed a gun at our necks at that time. It was that time that I parted from my wife and a toddler.
Did you ever see your wife and toddler after that?
Hot ban
Answer: no. After I was tied up, I was beaten, kicked, and they used the rubber sandals to hit our heads. Some of us fell down to the ground, and they grabbed our hairs. They kicked us repeatedly, and they said that these people were Muslims, and if we stated that we were Khmer, they would repeatedly kick and beat us at that time. But we were afraid at that time. That's why we said we were Khmer.
You said that when you arrived in Tria village, you saw many soldiers. Can you describe for us where it was that you saw the soldiers when you arrived in Tria village and what they were doing?
Answer: the soldiers were killing people. And people, ropes were used to tie people, and we were put on a boat, and the boat went into the middle of the river. I was staying in that house, and they came to collect some of us from time to time. I was on the house, and some of us were weeping and crying at that time. President, it is now time for a short break. The chamber will take a short break from now until 3 p.m. Court officer, please find a proper place for this witness during the break time, and please invite him back into the courtroom at 3 p.m. The court is now in recess.
ជើងក្រោមឈរ